afternoon, everybody, and congratulations to Zanele and to Devaki for thinking about bringing us together to celebrate our sister Fatima, who really inspired us all. I'm going to be very brief. I think a lot has been said. That also I share a lot of what has been said about Fatima. I want to talk about, as a Muslim woman, Fatima the rebel, how she was able to rebel against certain practices of Islam, but while she was still claiming to be a Muslim, and how she was doing this in a way that I felt very close to, in a way of really looking at Islam being interpreted by some who wanted to really control power, control women, control politics, and always understanding that this is a religion that is extremely dynamic and that whoever carries it owns it and reads it in its own way. And if you carry Islam and you are in a situation where you are in a situation of power, it can be harmful or good. And I think Fatima was very good in her own way, in a very creative way, present a lecture of Islam that was very much something I could adopt, and I was I felt very close with, and I felt that very close because at a very young age my grandmother was really like that. My grandmother, when I was, I think, 7 years old, I always used to go to the village, and my grandmother, when I was 7, told me, you know, why I'm teaching. My grandmother was a teacher. She had a madrasa. She was teaching Quran to boys and girls and even men. And people used to come from, because it was in South Mauritania, at that period, Senegal and Mauritania didn't have a frontier. And people were going from all over Mauritania to learn from my grandmother. And she told me, you know how I became a teacher? She said, because I sent your father to learn in the madrasa. And the man who was teaching was extremely violent. And I went there, he beat him very bad. I went there, I pushed him, and I took him back. And I decided I was going to teach, because I have the knowledge to teach. That really stuck in my mind. So I think, and every time I would come to her, so every time I would go on vacation, so everything I know about Islam, I was taught to me by my grandmother. And every time I would go to the village, I would tell her, people are saying, like my uncle is saying, I was like 10, I should cover my, he said, leave him alone. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to the men. She always used to tell me, don't listen to the men. And even though she was a woman, so I felt, when I met Fatima and I was reading her own lecture of Islam and how she was in a very clever, creative way, criticizing but still accepting very, very positive fundamental principles in Islam, I felt extremely close to that. I also felt like, remembering Fatima and her work and looking at what is happening today, we have a lot of young people who were not actually religious coming back to Islam because of all what is happening right now in the West and this whole demonization of Islam. And my daughter told me, Mom, I'm afraid to tell that I'm Muslim in certain spaces because I don't know how people react, especially in the US. And my son, who is growing a long beard, because saying, and he doesn't even pray, he doesn't go to the mosque. But he's just growing his long beard, and I say, this stresses me out. He said, because I want people to arrest me, and I say, I'm Muslim. I say, don't do that. So I think young people, and in Senegal, we have a lot of young people now wearing the hijab, and it's called hijab chic. And they have the different fashions of it, different way. And they wear this hijab, they have the breast almost half out, very tight jeans, and they will cover the head. So it's a very, so and every time I'm seeing this as a Muslim woman, I think about Fatima and how women like her have been really, and us who followed, had a very different lecture of reading of Islam. I also want to talk about, I also remember Fatima as a strategic rebel. in terms of, how she was very much teaching and teaching at several levels. Many of our feminists, we like to be in our safe space between feminists, between economists, feminist economists, discussing what we know, what we think is right, how do we challenge patriarchy, how do we challenge globalization. But we stop there. Some of us even are afraid to be in the village, or afraid to be with women who don't speak, and are kind of intimidated because you don't know what to do. Fatema was comfortable, and her weapon was teaching. And it takes me back to my grandmother also, who used teaching as a weapon, and who used to always discipline us in a way that it was not brutal, but she just, you have to think, dig in your mind, but it was so loving in a way she was doing it. So I think Fatema was teaching, but teaching with so much love. From her writing, where she was really teaching to liberate the mind against misconceptions, but also working with the weavers. And through her work with the weavers, it was also teaching. Teaching to how to present their work, teaching on how they could read in their local language, teaching the students in the after post-1980s on how can organize to go actually to teach others, and making sure that through teaching you get empowered. Because what we may not see or may not know is that many of the weavers actually became decision makers, because some of them were even elected at local government through the process of the caravan, but also through the process of not only selling their product overseas, but even in their own community, how they were able to read and write in local languages, which they didn't do before, many of them, but also how they were able to position themselves in political decision making. So I really also think that, because I'm not reading what I wrote, I'm just so I think and also she was very flexible. Despite the fact that she was very critical of the West, she also understood that, these weavers could sell their product overseas. And I really like that parallel understanding of, yes, you cannot be seeing things black and white. You need to be also to see how you can create spaces for women in all over, and for them to be able to be selling outside markets, was in markets outside, and taking them outside the country, even though for herself, Morocco was a space she needed to be at a certain point. To me, I found that extremely generous, meaning that, you have been there, but you're also allowing the space for others to go there and learn on their own. But I feel that, and one of the things that also I feel very, very important to me is working with young people. Working with young people, and Fatema's contribution in really post-student movement, trying to harness, trying to orient the youth movement towards really learning, sharing, but also teaching others. A form of organizing, going back to the rural areas, because a lot of student movement people are staying in the urban around the university. But she really encouraged them to go back to the communities, and in doing so, certainly, in her mind of a teacher, she was expecting they will learn, but they will also share. So I feel that was something that was extremely important. So I really remember her as a woman who used to tell me, Yassine, you have to be very careful. I want to protect you. In what you say, and I feel like even though she was so knowledgeable, she was also always seeing me personally coming from Senegal. I mean, Morocco and Senegal is one of the Arab countries where we can go without a visa, because there is a long history of so many things sharing. I felt really a big loss when she left, like all of you. Thank you very much.